The Elephant Island Chronicles presents Dreaming is Free. The first in the Dreaming, Blondie song, inspired anthology. By Conrad Hannon, narration by 11 Labs. Dreaming is Free by Conrad Hannon. The neon sign flickered, casting an intermittent red glow across the rain-slicked street. Maya watched the droplets race down the diner's window, each one a fleeting moment of clarity before blurring into obscurity. The late-night shift dragged on, a symphony of clinking cutlery, and the occasional grunt from the cook punctuating the otherwise oppressive silence. Maya's fingers tapped an absent rhythm on the worn Formica counter. 23 years old, she already felt the weight of routine pressing down on her shoulders. The diner, with its chipped mugs and perpetual smell of burned coffee, was a purgatory of sorts, neither hell nor heaven, just an endless loop of pouring refills and wiping down tables. A truck rumbled past, its headlights momentarily illuminating the nearly empty restaurant. In that flash, Maya caught sight of her reflection in the window. Dark circles under weary eyes, hair hastily pulled back, the cheap polyester uniform hanging loose on her frame. She barely recognized herself anymore. The bell above the door chimed, pulling Maya from her reverie. She turned, plastering on the obligatory smile that never quite reached her eyes. But as the newcomer stepped into the fluorescent light, the smile faltered, replaced by genuine curiosity. He was a stark contrast to the usual late-night crowd of truckers and night shift workers. Tall and lean, with a mop of unruly dark hair, he looked like he'd stepped out of a different world entirely. His clothes were rumpled as if he'd been sleeping in them, but there was an undeniable energy about him, a spark in his eyes that seemed to defy the dreary night. "Coffee black," he said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. His voice was gravelly, tinged with an accent Maya couldn't quite place. "And whatever's warm." Maya nodded, turning to pour the coffee. Their eyes met when she placed the steaming mug in front of him. For a moment, the diner faded away, and Maya felt as if she were falling into depths of green flecked with gold. "Pie," she blurted out, breaking the spell. "We've got apple pie. It's decent." The corner of his mouth quirked up. "Sounds perfect." Maya could feel his gaze on her as she busied herself with the pie. It wasn't uncomfortable, not like the leers she sometimes got from less savory customers. Instead, it felt familiar, like déjà vu, but stronger. "I'm Alex," he said as she set the plate in front of him. "Maya," she replied, surprised to find herself extending her hand. His grip was firm, his palm calloused. The touch sent a jolt through her like static electricity. "Maya," he repeated as if tasting the name. "Like the civilization?" She blinked, caught off guard. I don't know. My mom was into New Age stuff. Probably picked it from some book on chakras." Alex chuckled a warm sound that seemed to chase away some of the diner's chill. "Names have power, you know. The Maya built entire cities and created complex mathematical systems. They were dreamers." "Dreamers, huh?" Maya leaned against the counter, forgetting for a moment that she was supposed to be working. "Well, they got that part right at least." "Oh." Alex raised an eyebrow, fork poised over his pie. "What do you dream about, Maya?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Maya hesitated, unused to such direct inquiries from customers. Usually it was all business: order, serve, collect payment. But something about Alex made her want to open up and share the vibrant world behind her eyelids. "Everything," she said softly. "I dream about everything I'm not living. Paris cafes, mountain peaks, and dance halls in Rio. I dream about building things, impossible things. Golden roads that stretch to the horizon, cities that touch the clouds." She paused, suddenly self-conscious. Stupid, right? Alex shook his head, his eyes intense. Not stupid. Never stupid. Dreams they're messages, Maya. From ourselves, from the universe. The question is, are we brave enough to listen? A shiver ran down Maya's spine. She'd never heard anyone talk like this before, not in real life. It was the kind of conversation she imagined having in her dreams with faceless strangers who seemed to understand her completely. But they're not real, she argued, more to convince herself than him. Dreams, I mean. They're just escape. Are they? Alex challenged, leaning closer. Or are they glimpses of what could be? Maybe your life now is the real fantasy and your dreams. He gestured expansively, nearly knocking over his coffee. Maybe they're reality trying to break through. Maya opened her mouth to respond, but the cook's gruff voice cut through the moment. Order up! Reality reasserted itself. Maya straightened, smoothing down her apron. I should... Alex nodded, understanding. Go. But Maya? He caught her wrist gently as she turned to leave. Don't stop dreaming. It might just save your life. As Maya moved to collect the order, she felt off balance, as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She glanced back at Alex, half expecting him to have vanished like a mirage. But he was still there, savoring his pie with the intensity of someone tasting freedom. For the rest of her shift, Maya moved in a daze. She went through the motions, refilling coffee, clearing tables, but her mind was elsewhere. It drifted to sun-drenched beaches and snow-capped mountains, to bustling markets filled with spices and silk. In each of these visions, she caught glimpses of a familiar figure with unruly dark hair and eyes that seemed to see right through her. Maya hung up her apron as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky. She turned to say goodbye to Alex, but his seat at the counter was empty. Only a generous tip and a napkin with a hastily scrawled note remained. Dreams are maps. Follow them. A. Maya tucked the napkin into her pocket, a talisman against the encroaching reality of another day. As she stepped out into the cool morning air, the city began to stir. But for the first time in years, Maya didn't feel the usual dread of another monotonous day. Instead, there was a spark of something new. Anticipation, perhaps, or hope. She began her walk home, but each step felt different. The cracks in the sidewalk weren't just obstacles to avoid, they were fissures of possibility. The graffiti on the alley walls wasn't vandalism, but secret messages in a code she was just beginning to decipher. And as a street musician began to play, the notes didn't just float on the air, they danced, visible and tangible, inviting Maya to follow their melody into the unknown. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music wash over her. When she opened them, the world seemed sharper, more vivid. She took a deep breath and began walking again, not towards her apartment, but in a new direction. The key turned in the lock with a familiar click, but as Maya pushed open the door to her tiny studio apartment, it felt like entering a stranger's home. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of instant noodles and yesterday's laundry. Piles of discarded clothing formed miniature mountain ranges on the floor, and unwashed dishes teetered precariously in the sink. Maya's gaze swept over the cramped space, seeing it with new eyes. How long had she been living like this, surrounded by the detritus of a life half-lived? The walls, once white, had faded to a dull gray, mirroring the monotony of her days. But now, in the wake of her encounter with Alex, even these shabby surroundings seemed charged with potential. She moved to the window, pushing aside the threadbare curtains. The city sprawled before her, a concrete jungle bathed in the soft light of dawn. Somewhere out there, Alex was walking these same streets, carrying with him the key to a world Maya had only glimpsed in her dreams. Exhaustion tugged at her limbs, but Maya resisted the urge to collapse into bed. Instead, She reached for the sketchbook buried beneath a pile of bills on her cluttered desk. The pages were filled with half-finished drawings, fragments of dreams she'd tried to capture upon waking. Golden roads and cloud-kissing towers, faces of strangers who felt like old friends. With trembling fingers, Maya began to draw. The pencil moved across the paper with a mind of its own, tracing the contours of a face that was becoming all too familiar. Alex emerged on the page, his eyes holding that same spark of mystery and promise. But as Maya added the final touches, she realized the background wasn't the diner. It was a place she'd never seen before, a vast desert dotted with impossible structures, pyramids that seemed to be made of light rather than stone. The sun was high in the sky by the time Maya finally succumbed to sleep, the sketchbook clutched to her chest like a lifeline. The dream began, as it always did, with Maya standing at the edge of a precipice. But this time, instead of the usual vertigo, she felt a surge of exhilaration. The wind whipped around her, carrying whispers of adventure and possibility. Beautiful, isn't it? Maya turned to find Alex standing beside her, his hair wild in the wind, eyes reflecting the golden light that seemed to emanate from the very air around them. "Where are we?" she asked, though some part of her already knew the answer. Alex smiled, gesturing to the vast expanse before them. "This is your world, Maya. You built it, dream by dream." As if his words were a spell, the landscape began to shift. The desert sands rippled like water, giving rise to towering structures that defied physics. Bridges of light arced between floating islands, and in the distance, a city of crystal and gold reached towards a sky painted with colors Maya had no names for. I created all this?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper, awe and disbelief warring within her. "Every night," Alex confirmed. "But you always forget when you wake up. You convince yourself it's not real, that it's just fantasy." He took her hand, his touch electric even in this dreamscape. "But what if I told you that all of this, is more real than the world you think you're living in?" Maya wanted to argue, to cling to the solid ground of reality she thought she knew. But as she looked out over this impossible, beautiful world, she felt a profound sense of homecoming. Every spire and archway, shimmering road and glittering fountain were all extensions of her, manifestations of desires she'd never dared to acknowledge in her waking life. "Show me," she said, squeezing Alex's hand. "Show me everything." And so they began to explore. They raced down roads paved with starlight, each step carrying them impossibly far. As they ascended, they climbed towers that sang in harmonic tones, the music becoming part of their very beings. In a garden where the flowers bloomed with memories instead of petals, Maya saw flashes of a life she might have lived, or might yet live. Alex was her constant companion through it all, his presence both familiar and thrillingly new. He challenged her to push the boundaries of this dream world, to shape it according to her wildest imaginings. Under his guidance, Maya learned to manipulate the fabric of her dreamscape, molding it like clay and breathing life into her most fantastical ideas. But as they stood atop a mountain that hadn't existed moments before, Maya felt a nagging doubt. "This is incredible," she said, "but it's still just a dream. When I wake up—" "When you wake up," Alex interrupted, his voice gentle but firm, "you'll have a choice. You can dismiss all this as fantasy and return to your gray world of diners and drudgery. Or ... Or, Maya prompted, holding her breath. Alex cupped her face in his hands, his gaze intense. Or you can choose to believe, to see the wonder and potential in every moment, awake or asleep, to live as if your dreams are maps to a better reality. The dream began to fade around them, the vibrant colors bleeding into the dull palette of Maya's bedroom. But Alex's words echoed in her mind, a challenge, and a promise. "Remember, Maya," he called as he too began to disappear. "Pleasure's real. It's the life you've been living that's the illusion." Maya's eyes snapped open, her heart racing. The dream clung to her like a second skin, more vivid and present than any she'd had before. She could still feel the phantom touch of Alex's hands on her face, still see the impossible city they'd explored together. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting patterns on the cluttered floor. Maya sat up slowly, expecting the usual disorientation and disappointment that came with waking. But instead, she felt different, charged, as if she'd tapped into some hidden reserve of energy. Her gaze fell on the sketchbook, still clutched in her hands. With trembling fingers, she opened it, half expecting to find blank pages. But there it was, the drawing she'd made before falling asleep. Alex's face stared back at her, surrounded by the dreamscape she'd just visited. It hadn't been just a dream. Or if it had, it was a dream that had bled into reality, leaving tangible proof of its existence. Maya stood, moving to the window. The city outside was the same as it had always been. Traffic and concrete, billboards and bustling crowds. But now she saw it with new eyes. The glint of sunlight on a skyscraper's windows became a cascade of liquid gold. The intricate patterns of cracks in the sidewalk morphed into secret maps, hinting at hidden wonders beneath the surface. For the first time in years, Maya felt truly awake. And as she gazed out at the world, brimming with newfound possibility, she decided she would no longer be a passive observer in her own life. It was time to start building those golden roads, to reach for those cloud-touching towers. The next few weeks passed in a blur of color and sensation for Maya. Each day, she woke with the lingering warmth of her dreams, the boundary between sleep and wakefulness growing ever more porous. The drab walls of her apartment became canvases, splashed with vivid murals that seemed to shift and breathe when she wasn't looking directly at them. Her sketchbook filled with increasingly intricate drawings, cities that defied physics, landscapes that existed beyond the spectrum of normal light. At the diner, Maya moved through her shifts in a dreamlike state. The clatter of dishes and hum of conversation faded into the background, replaced by the whisper of impossible winds and the crystalline music of her dream towers. She found herself engaging with customers in new ways, seeing past their tired expressions and rumpled clothes to the dreams that might lie dormant within them. "You look like you've seen the world," she said to a truck driver with eyes the color of desert sand. He chuckled, a sound like gravel shifting. "Darlin', I've crossed this country more times than I can count, but I wouldn't say I've seen the world." Maya leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "But in your dreams? Where do you go when you close your eyes?" The man's weather-beaten face softened, a faraway look entering his eyes. "You know, I have this recurring dream. There's this road, see? Goes straight up into the sky, twisting like a ribbon. And at the end..." He trailed off, shaking his head. It's nothing, just nonsense." "It's not nonsense," Maya insisted, her heart racing. "It's a message, a map." The trucker gave her an odd look, but there was a glimmer of something in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or awakening curiosity. As he left, Maya noticed him pause at the door, gazing up at the sky as if seeing it for the first time. These moments accumulated small cracks in the facade of mundane reality. Maya began to see them everywhere, a child's chalk drawing that seemed to ripple with hidden depth, a street musician whose melodies painted colors in the air, and the way shadows sometimes moved independently of their casters when viewed from the corner of her eye. And always, there was Alex. He appeared in her dreams nightly now, a constant companion and guide as they explored the ever-expanding world of Maya's imagination. But increasingly, She caught glimpses of him in her waking hours, too. A flash of unruly dark hair in a passing crowd. The echo of his laugh carried on the wind. Once, she could have sworn she saw him reflected in a shop window, standing right behind her. But when she turned, the street was empty. "Am I going crazy?" Maya murmured to herself one evening, staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face that looked back at her was familiar and strange, her eyes brighter, her skin seeming to glow from within. She looked awake, alive in a way she'd never been before. But with this awakening came consequences. Her performance at the diner became erratic. She'd forget orders, lost in contemplation of the sacred geometry hidden in the patterns of spilled coffee. Her co-workers whispered behind her back, shooting her concerned glances. Even her regulars began to treat her differently, a mixture of wariness and fascination in their eyes. It all came to a head on a rain-soaked Tuesday night. The diner was empty save for a single customer, an elderly woman nursing a cup of tea, her gnarled hands wrapped around the mug as if for warmth. Maya found herself drawn to the woman, seeing not just the physical form before her but layers of light and shadow, hints of past and future selves. "You're at a crossroads, dear," the woman said suddenly, her voice cracked with age but filled with unmistakable power. Maya started, nearly dropping the pot of coffee she'd been holding. "I'm sorry." The old woman's eyes, magnified by thick glasses, seemed to peer straight into Maya's soul. "Two paths lie before you. One leads back to the world you've always known, safe, predictable, but oh so gray. The other—" She gestured with a trembling hand, and for a moment, Maya could have sworn she saw golden light trailing from her fingertips. "The other leads into mystery. Great joy, great sorrow. Nothing will ever be the same." Heart-pounding, Maya sank into the booth across from the woman. Who are you?" A smile creased the old face, enigmatic and knowing. "Someone who made her choice long ago. The question is, Maya, what will you choose?" Before Maya could respond, a clap of thunder shook the diner. The lights flickered, and the old woman vanished in that moment of darkness. When the fluorescents hummed back to life, there was nothing left but an empty mug and a few crumpled dollar bills. Maya stood on shaking legs, her mind reeling. She walked to the window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the city glistened like a jewel, every surface reflecting fractured light. And there, just across the street, stood Alex. He raised a hand in greeting, an invitation in his eyes. Without a second thought, Maya untied her apron and let it fall to the floor. She scribbled a hasty note. "I quit. Thank you for everything," and left it on the counter. Then, heart pounding with equal parts terror and exhilaration, she pushed open the diner door and stepped out into the night. Alex was waiting, his smile a beacon in the dark. "Ready for a real adventure?" he asked, extending his hand. Maya took it without hesitation, feeling the familiar electric tingle of his touch. "I thought you'd never ask." As they walked away from the diner, the street seemed to shift around them. The puddles at their feet deepened, reflecting not the city above, but impossible vistas, mountain ranges that had never known human feet, oceans teeming with luminescent life. The very air thrummed with potential. Maya glanced back once at the diner, at the life she was leaving behind. For a moment, doubt flickered in her heart. But then she looked at Alex, at the hand clasped in hers, and knew with unshakable certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Together, they rounded a corner. The world around Maya and Alex melted and reformed like wax under a flame. Streets became rivers of starlight, buildings twisted into impossible shapes that defied Euclidean geometry. Maya felt as if she were walking through a painting that was still wet, the colors and forms fluid and alive. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice a mixture of awe and trepidation. Alex's eyes sparkled with mischief and something more profound, almost sad. "Wherever you want, Maya. This is your dream, after all." As they walked, the landscape continued to shift. They passed through a forest where the trees whispered long-forgotten secrets, their leaves shimmering with fragments of memories. Maya caught glimpses of her childhood, of hopes long abandoned, of faces she'd forgotten she knew. They crested a hill and found themselves on the edge of a vast desert. But this was no ordinary expanse of sand. The dunes rippled with color, each grain a tiny prism refracting light in ways that shouldn't be possible. In the distance, Maya saw the golden city from her dreams, its spires reaching up to pierce a sky swirling with auroras. "It's all so beautiful," Maya breathed, squeezing Alex's hand. "I never want to wake up." Alex's smile faltered for a moment. "Maya," he said gently, "what makes you think this isn't real?" Before she could answer, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The desert sand rose up in a great wave, carrying them towards the shimmering city. As they drew closer, Maya realized that the buildings were constructed not of gold, but of pure light given form. Each structure pulsed with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. They landed softly in what appeared to be the city's central square. Beings of light moved about, their forms constantly shifting. Some looked almost human, others were utterly alien, yet Maya felt no fear. There was a sense of welcome, of homecoming. "Why does this feel so familiar?" Maya asked, reaching out to touch a nearby pillar. It hummed beneath her fingers, warm and alive. Alex watched her closely. "Because you created it, Maya. All of this," he gestured expansively, "is born from your imagination, your deepest desires and fears." Maya turned to him, a crease forming between her brows. "But what about you? Did I create you too?" The sadness in Alex's eyes deepened. "In a way," he said softly. "I'm a part of you, Maya. The part that knows there's more to life than what you've allowed yourself to experience. The part that's been trying to wake you up." As he spoke, his form began to shimmer, becoming less solid. Maya reached for him in panic, but her hand passed right through. "No!" she cried. "Don't leave me!" Alex's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "I'm not leaving, Maya. I'm always with you. But it's time for you to stand on your own." The city around them began to fade, the beings of light dispersing like mist. Maya found herself standing alone in a vast, white space. No, not alone. As she turned, she saw reflections of herself stretching infinitely in every direction. Each reflection showed a different version of Maya. Some older, some younger, some dressed in fantastic costumes, others in simple work uniforms. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice echoing in the emptiness. "This is you," Alex's voice replied, though he was nowhere to be seen. "Every version of you that ever was or could be, every dream, every possibility." Maya walked among her reflections, studying each one. There she was as a child, eyes wide with wonder. There as an old woman, face lined with experience but eyes still bright. There as a warrior, a scholar, an artist, a mother. "I don't understand," Maya said, overwhelmed by the endless variations of herself. "You've been living a fraction of your potential, Maya," Alex explained. "Trapped in a loop of mundane existence, too afraid to reach for more. But look at all you could be, all you already are." As he spoke, Maya began to remember, not just her life as a waitress in a dingy diner, but countless other lives, other experiences. She remembered soaring through alien skies and diving into the depths of uncharted oceans. She remembered loving and losing, triumphing and failing, always learning, constantly growing. "I'm dreaming," she said, but the words felt hollow. "Are you?" Alex challenged. "Or are you finally waking up?" The white space around her began to crack, shards of reality falling away to reveal glimpses of other worlds, other lives. Maya felt herself expanding, her consciousness stretching to encompass more than she'd ever thought possible. "It's too much," she gasped, overwhelmed by the flood of memories and sensations. "Breathe, Maya," Alex's voice soothed. "You've done this before, many times. You're just remembering how—" Maya closed her eyes, focusing on her breath. As she did, she felt herself settling, the rush of information organizing in her mind. When she opened her eyes again, she was back in the Golden City, but now she saw it with a new understanding. The beings of light were aspects of herself, representing different traits and experiences. The city itself was a construct, a safe space she'd created to process her expanding awareness. "I remember," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I'm not just Maya, the waitress. I'm everything." Alex materialized beside her, his form more translucent than before, but his smile as warm as ever. "And nothing," he added. "Your infinite potential, constantly creating and experiencing itself." Maya looked at her hands, seeing not just flesh but the energy that composed her, the fabric of reality she was part of and yet transcended. "Why did I forget?" she asked. "Why did I choose to live such a limited life?" Alex's expression was compassionate. "Sometimes we need to forget in order to remember. We need to experience limitations so we can appreciate the infinite. Your time as Maya, the waitress, wasn't a mistake or a waste. It was a journey, a chapter in your eternal story." Maya nodded, understanding flooding through her, but with it came a pang of sadness. What happens now? Do I just leave that life behind? Alex took her hand, his touch like a merging of energy rather than physical contact. "That's up to you. You can return to that life with new awareness, infusing it with the wonder and potential you've rediscovered. Or you can move on to new adventures. The choice, as always, is yours." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of infinite possibilities before her. "I want both," Maya said, her voice resonant with newfound certainty. "I want to return to my life, but with this awareness. I want to be the bridge between worlds." Alex's smile was radiant, a courageous choice, and a rare one. The Golden City around them began to shift once more, but this time, Maya could see the underlying structure of reality, the way her consciousness shaped the world around her. She was no longer a passive observer, but an active creator. "Will I remember all of this?" she asked, already feeling the edges of her expanded awareness beginning to blur. "Not everything," Alex admitted. "At least, not all at once. But you'll carry the essence with you. And I'll be there, in the quiet moments, in the spaces between breaths, to remind you." Maya nodded, a bittersweet ache in her chest. "Will I see you again? Like this, I mean." Alex's form was fading, merging with the light around them. "I'm always with you, Maya. I'm part of you. Look for me in your dreams, in moments of inspiration, in the eyes of strangers who spark something in your soul. I'll be there." With a final smile, Alex disappeared entirely. Maya stood alone in the fading dreamscape, feeling as vast as the cosmos and as small as a single grain of sand. She took a deep breath, embracing the paradox of her existence, and closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was back in her tiny apartment. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting patterns on the floor. For a moment, Maya felt disoriented, the weight of her mundane life settling back onto her shoulders. But then she noticed something different. The walls, once drab and gray, now shimmered with faint iridescence. Her collection of chipped mugs on the kitchen counter seemed to hum with hidden energy. And when she looked in the mirror, her eyes held a spark that hadn't been there before, a hint of the infinite possibilities she knew existed within her. Maya got dressed for her shift at the diner, but each movement felt deliberate, infused with new meaning. As she walked the familiar route to work, the city around her seemed transformed, not in any obvious physical way, but in how she perceived it. The cracks in the sidewalk were no longer just flaws in the concrete, but tiny labyrinths holding mysteries. The rhythm of traffic and pedestrians felt like the pulse of some greater, living entity. Pushing open the door to the diner, Maya was greeted by the familiar scent of coffee and grilled food. But now, underneath it all, she sensed something more. The dreams and longings of every person who had ever passed through these doors. "You're late," her manager grumbled, thrusting an apron at her. Maya accepted it with a smile. "Sorry about that. I got a little lost in a dream." As she moved through her shift, Maya found herself truly seeing her coworkers and customers for the first time. The surly cook's scowl hid a passion for painting he'd abandoned years ago. The businessman hurriedly gulping coffee held the weight of unspoken poetry in his eyes. The young couple in the corner booth radiated with the glow of new love, their auras intertwining in a dance visible only to Maya's newfound perception. She engaged with each of them differently now, speaking to the deeper parts of themselves they had forgotten or neglected. A word here, a smile there, small acts of kindness that rippled out in ways she could now perceive. As the day wore on, Maya began to understand the true nature of her choice. She was a waymaker, a dream weaver, tasked with bridging the world of infinite possibility and the realm of everyday existence. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when the fluorescent lights and monotonous routine threatened to dull her newfound awareness. But in those moments, she would close her eyes, take a breath, and feel the hum of the universe coursing through her. As she hung up her apron at the end of her shift, Maya noticed a new customer entering the diner. He was unremarkable in appearance, just another face in the crowd. But when their eyes met, she saw a flicker of something familiar, a spark of recognition, a hint of shared mystery. Maya smiled, remembering Alex's words, "I'll be there in the eyes of strangers who spark something in your soul." "Welcome," she said, grabbing a menu. "What brings you in today? A cup of coffee? A slice of pie? Or perhaps—" She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice low but filled with the music of distant dreams. "A taste of the infinite?" The stranger's eyes widened, a slow smile spreading across his face. And in that moment, as the late afternoon sun painted the diner in hues of gold and possibility, Maya knew that her real work, her real dream, was just beginning. She had chosen to be fully awake in a world half asleep, to find the extraordinary within the ordinary, to see the dream within the reality. It wouldn't always be easy, but as she felt the pulse of the universe beating in harmony with her heart, Maya knew it would always be worth it. After all, pleasure, true pleasure, wasn't a fantasy to be chased or a dream to be deferred. It was here, now, in every moment fully lived, every connection genuinely made, and every dream bravely followed. Maya picked up the coffee pot, ready to pour a cup that contained not just caffeine but infinite potential. Her journey as a dreamweaver, a bridge between worlds, had only begun. And somewhere in the spaces between heartbeats and the pause between breaths, Alex smiled. The end. From all of us here at the Elephant Island Chronicles, we hope you have enjoyed this original short story by Conrad Hannon. Until next time, stay gruntled.